Hi, I'm Mark Chin, Partner and Senior Vice President for Realty Executives, Arizona Territory. Welcome to Mark's Minutes Video Library. These videos are intended for the exclusive use of our agents. They are designed to be a brief overview of topics that we are frequently asked about. They are not intended to be a substitute for legal advice. If you have additional questions after viewing this or any other video, please feel free to contact our broker support team and they will be happy to help you. Thank you. Welcome back to Mark's Minutes. We will be going over the BINSR Part 2, and we're going to be focusing on the residential purchase contract from AAR. And I'd like to reference you all to page 6, sections 6I and J, lines 260 through 289. These will also cross-reference with the BINSR itself. So if we look at 6I, and lines 260 through 263, it talks about the inspection period notice. And it says, prior to expiration of the inspection period, buyer shall deliver to seller a signed notice of any items disapproved on AAR's buyer inspection notice and seller's response form. So you want to make sure that you do all your inspections and that you use the BINSR to list your items. And again, they are stating the items that are disapproved on there. And then you go down to buyer disapproval, 6J, section line 264. If buyer, in buyer's sole discretion, disapproves of any items as allowed herein, buyer shall deliver to seller a signed notice of the items disapproved. Once again, they're asking you to make sure you itemize the items that are disapproved, and then you will also be using the BINSR for that. And then the buyer elects to either immediately cancel the contract, in which case that section A says if buyer notice specifies disapproval of items as allowed herein, the earnest money will be released to the buyer. So if you want to make sure the buyer gets the earnest money back, you want to make sure that you have a disapproval of items specific to the property. If buyer's notice fails to specify items disapproved as allowed herein, the cancellation will remain in effect, but the buyer has failed to comply with the provision of the contract, and seller may deliver to buyer a cure notice as required by section 7A. So effectively what that means is if we restate it and state that if the seller intends to try to claim the earnest money, then the seller must give the buyer a cure notice. So the seller doesn't have to give the buyer a cure notice if they're not intending to claim the earnest money. But if they are trying to claim the earnest money, then they must give the buyer a cure notice. And then, or lines 274, providing seller an opportunity to correct the items disapproved, in which case the seller shall respond in writing within 5 days after delivery of the buyer's notice of disapproved items. Seller's non-response within 5 days is effectively a refusal of the buyer's repair request. So the seller can answer in 5 days in writing the response, or the seller, if they don't answer, effectively have answered, and that's just a rejection of the buyer's repair request. Lines 265, 260, 285, 286. Verbal discussions do not extend the time periods, only a written agreement. So you want to make sure everything's in writing. The verbal extensions to a BINSR or a seller's response are not valid. So make sure that if you need time, you get an extension in writing by the parties and both parties sign. 287, buyer's failure to give notice of disapproval of items or cancellation of the contract within the specified time period shall be conclusively deemed buyer's election to proceed with the transaction without correction of any disapproved items. So again, the time frames are critical. If you don't change the contract, the buyer has 10 days to determine if they want to proceed or not. If they decide to cancel, they must list the items specific to the premises that they disapprove of. If they give the seller a chance to repair items, then they must list the items that are disapproved. What you can do on the BINSR is if you list the items that are disapproved, you don't want to use phrases like in lieu of repairs. The lenders don't like that. But if you itemize the items that are disapproved. Then after you've done that, you may put, or seller may credit buyer X amount of dollars towards buyer's closing costs at close of escrow, or seller shall reduce sales price to X amount of dollars at close of escrow. So if you do that, though, you'll need to follow that up with an addendum saying something like addendum item number 1 will say seller shall pay X amount of dollars towards buyer's closing costs at close of escrow. Item number 2, or number 2 on the addendum, would state that buyer hereby removes the contingency of home inspection. So the buyer has then gotten their seller concession and the home inspection contingency has been removed, but you've never used the phrase in lieu of repairs. So you've got to be a little careful with that. Again, you can get seller credit or price reduction instead of repairs, but again, you must always list the items that are disapproved before asking the seller to give a price reduction or a seller concession. And if you do that in the BINSR, you must convert that into an addendum so that it becomes valid, because the BINSR may not change the contract, the addendum may. Again, there are a lot of issues and questions around this. This is just a brief overview, but if you have any other questions, feel free to call one of us in broker support.